Viewers email me all the time asking if they should buy a particular vintage shotgun that they came across. My answer is always exactly the same. I'm not there to inspect it, so I can't give you an answer. Buying vintage shotguns is a gamble, and I've made many good and bad purchases over my lifetime. I spent years buying old shotguns, fixing them up a little, and turning them over for profit. And while doing that, I learned a great deal, and I'm going to share what I learned with you. You'll never know the truth about a gun until you actually shoot rounds through it. Unfortunately, when you're at a gun show, buying a consignment gun at a pawn shop or buying from a private seller, you can't actually shoot the gun before buying it. At least most of the time you can't. But there are things that you can measure and inspect to get a good idea of the gun's overall condition and function, and decide if the gun meets your requirements. In this video, I'll show you how I inspect and choose vintage shotguns. And this is a little kit that I put together when I'm going to consider buying a vintage shotgun at a gun show or a gun store. And all of these items allow me to inspect the overall condition of a shotgun to test its function. Most vintage shotguns have fixed choke barrels, and many of them, aren't marked for how the barrel is choked. So I always carry a choke and chamber gauge set right here to determine chamber length and the choke constriction. Chokes are important for use, and if both barrels are fully choked, I'll probably pass on the gun because it's useless for me for upland hunting or for shooting ducks over decoys. So I don't like fully choked, fixed choke barrels. And you'll also find that vintage shotguns with fully choked fixed barrels have very little aftermarket value. The next thing I bring is a small tape measure. And this is to measure the barrel length and the length of the pull on the gun. A 24-inch barrel is probably too short for most people, and a 32-inch barrel is way too long for most upland hunters. Also, some guns have excessive length of pull, and some seem to be stocked for little kids, so a tape measure is actually very handy. If I'm looking at a vintage shotgun that has screw-in chokes, I also bring a choke wrench, a universal choke wrench with me, so I can remove the chokes that are in there to make sure that they're not seized up or anything, or the threads aren't boogered on them. Probably the most important thing you're going to bring with you is snap caps, and these can be used to check the chamber and check all function of the gun. Many pre-war shotguns have 2.5-inch or 2 9/16 inch chambers, and ammo is going to be hard to find if you actually want to use those guns. So typically, if I'm buying a gun that I want to use, I'm only going to buy a gun with 2 3/4-inch or 70 millimeter chambers. Like I said, this gauge right here also measures chamber depth, so you can figure that out. So you need to function test the shotgun. So you're going to fully load it with snap caps and test the trigger out for function. Then you're going to cycle the action if it's a pump or a semi-auto, or open the action up if it's a double, and make sure that the shells extract, eject, and that new ones feed into it. Next, I want to check the wood for cracks and damage. And hairline cracks are often very hard to see, so I bring a magnifying glass with a light on it to inspect the wood thoroughly. And this also lets you look closely at rust spots to judge the extent of damage on the gun. I also bring a small bore light with me. With shotguns, it's easy to see the entire bore with the naked eye and a light. And basically, when you're looking down the bores, you're looking for pitting and dents in the barrel that'll be difficult or impossible to repair. I also bring my brass hammer with a wood handle with me so I can do the ring test on double-barreled shotguns. And lastly, I bring a pair of glasses with me so I can actually see what the hell I'm doing when I'm inspecting the shotgun. Old side-by-sides and over and unders seem very simple and foolproof to most people, but there's actually a lot that can go wrong with these. And in the end, they might even be a little bit more fragile than your average pump or semi-auto shotgun. And when these types of guns do wear out, repair is usually complicated and or very expensive. The first thing you do is you're going to look at the position of the top lever with the action closed. On a new gun, this lever will be proud right or drastically right of center. As the gun wears out, the lever will creep to the left more and more as it ages. Once the lever is left of center, the lockup is normally considered worn out. Next, you want to make sure that the gun is what's called on face, meaning that the fit is flush between the barrel flats, receiver, and breech. Hold the gun out with the forend off and give it a good shake. And see if you feel or noticeably see any type of rattling in there. Also, grab the barrels and the receiver and physically twist it a little bit and feel for any type of looseness in there. Old double guns, especially ones with side locks on them, are very prone to cracking in the stock. So you're going to have to check out all the points where the stock touches the receiver and always remove and inspect the entire forend when you look at old guns like these. When looking at the wood also, if any type of repairs are present, inspect those for quality and structural integrity on the repair, and understand that that repair probably lowers the value of the gun. And also be mindful that if there's any cracks in the stock, it's usually at the stock head, either under the side plates or behind the receiver itself. And those types of cracks or damage to the wood aren't going to be visible unless you physically unscrew and disassemble and separate the receiver from the stock. And no one's going to let you do that at a gun show or in a gun shop. So you're taking a risk in that area too when you buy an old side-by-side or over and under. And I always bring a brass hammer with me with a wooden handle if I'm looking at particularly an old side-by-side shotgun. And this is to perform what's called the ring test on barrels. You basically remove the forend, separate the barrels from the receiver, and you hang the barrels by your finger like that. And with the barrels fully suspended, you lightly tap up the entire length of both barrels and you listen for a ringing noise. And if the barrels don't ring like a bell, that's not a good thing. But if they do ring the entire length of the barrel, that means they're good. If the barrels have a really dull thud when you tap on them, it means that the solder holding the ribs together has probably degraded and the gun is going to need major work. Most people pass on guns where the barrels won't ring. If someone tried to hot blue a gun to fix it up, which a lot of unknowing gunsmiths do with a lot of vintage side-by-sides and over and unders, they likely degraded the solder under the rail, and that's why it's not ringing, and it's going to need an expensive repair job at that point. Many gun owners or shops out there aren't going to let you tap the barrel with brass because they're going to be afraid that you're going to damage the barrels or scratch the finish on it and ruin the value before you committed to buying it. So you can also use the wooden handle on it to kind of perform the same test. You know, in a pinch, if they won't even let you do that, you can also use your fingernail sometimes. But just understand that the ringing noise won't be as pronounced as using the brass hammer. The bores should also be nice and shiny. You know, a little bit of oxidation or very light pitting can be overlooked if you're looking for a shooter that you're going to fix up, but always avoid a heavily pitted or just outright dented barrel. You know, also look down the barrels to make sure that they're straight, that they're not bent, and be sure to inspect the barrel from both ends as well. A barrel thickness gauge can kind of help, but it's just way too cumbersome to carry around a gun show or something like that, in my opinion. Also, if the gun has screw-in chokes, you know, it's a newer vintage gun, and it has screw-in chokes on it, I would remove those to make sure that the threads are good and that the chokes aren't seized in there, because that also can be a problem. And lastly, you need to do a function check, and this is going to require snap caps. You know, on a gun with double triggers like this, it's very easy. You simply pull the trigger on both barrels with the snap caps in there and make sure that they function. You know, then you're going to open up the action and make sure they extract if you have extractors, or eject if the gun has ejectors in it. Single triggers are a little bit more complicated because, you know, there's selectors involved that, you know, those also need to be function checked. And you need to test the inertia trigger on guns like that differently than a mechanical trigger. But snap caps let you test out triggers, extractors, ejectors, selectors, and safeties on the gun. Always bring snap caps with you when you're looking at old shotguns. There's also a coin test for firing pins that you can use, but most owners won't allow you to do that, you know, in a gun shop or a gun show, and most private sellers probably won't allow you to do that because they fear you're going to break a firing pin in the process. Now let's talk about buying and inspecting old pump and semi-automatic shotguns. No matter who you buy a shotgun from, any reputable seller out there should allow you to unscrew the magazine cap and inspect the gun broken down. If they don't allow you to do this, then don't buy the gun. You need to be able to remove the barrel in order to inspect the bore. When rust or wear is present on a shotgun like this, it's usually under the forend, you know, on the magazine tube, on the recoil mechanism, the gas system, the barrel guide, you know, or if it's a pump action, the action bars. Many bad things are hidden under forends, so always remove the magazine tube cap and remove the forend and barrel. It's also important to bring a couple of snap caps with you so you could test the trigger as well as feeding, ejection, and extraction. Also check the safety mechanism to make sure that that works. But with the barrel removed, give everything a good inspection, particularly the chamber. That chamber needs to be nice and smooth enough for these guns to cycle properly. These guns also tend to have thin, lightweight barrels on them, so they are prone to bending, bulging, or denting. So inspect the barrel very good. The extractor for these types of shotguns is located on the bolt, and you have to inspect that bolt to make sure it's in good condition. Even if you don't physically remove the bolt from the gun, with the barrel off, you can look down through the front of the receiver and you can see the extractor in there. On really old guns too, shell latches can be worn out, so look at that and make sure that the metal is still there and it's intact. Some modern guns have a carbon fiber or aluminum rib that always seems to shoot loose, so give the rib a good wiggle just to make sure everything's fine there, and make sure that the rib sections between the supports aren't dented in or missing. And also make sure that the beads are on good, that they're not loose or falling off. On pump action shotguns, the action bars must be straight. You know, if they're bent or they're twisted slightly, you'll get a stiff action and possibly extraction issues with that gun. Pumps and semi-autos tend to have a lot less cracking issues on the stocks compared to double-barreled guns, but cracks do occur on guns like this, so make sure that you inspect the wood carefully. And lastly, semi-auto shotguns have a lot of springs and wear parts in them, so try to look at shotguns where spare parts are still readily available. Older guns like 870s, 1100s, and Auto 5s have huge aftermarket support and factory parts availability still. So guns like that are good to buy used because you can replace typical springs and wear parts as needed. But many really old semi-autos have no spare parts for them available at all. So those are guns I try to stay away from. In my opinion, you need to put the reason for buying a vintage shotgun into perspective for yourself. Is it for collector value? Is it going to be used to hunt with? Or is it something that you plan on flipping for a profit? A collectible gun has to be totally 100% original, down to the factory finish. If somebody reblued it or added new furniture for it, it no longer has collector value. An old beat up gun is better than a fully restored gun in this regard. But for a gun that you actually want to use, especially for hunting, function and reliability matter more than anything probably. And you'll concentrate more on how the gun works and the condition of the bore than how pretty it is. You also have to verify that the vintage shotgun you buy is safe to use with modern shot shells. For a gun that you want to flip for profit, it needs to function and look good. And the only guns that you really seem to get good deals on to turn a profit on are the ones that are going to need a little bit of work. For these projects, I only buy guns where parts availability is good. Otherwise, you'll need custom work done to fix that thing up, and that'll kill any profit you want to get out of the shotgun. Personally, I buy vintage shotguns for all three reasons: to collect, to use, and to flip for profit. And I have different buying criteria for every purpose. First and foremost, anything I want to shoot frequently must be safe to shoot. Old guns with Damascus twist barrels are not shooters in my opinion. Also, you're really gambling buying vintage shotguns online in my opinion. I've done it with great success, but I've also done it and ended up with expensive failures. Even pictures of levers on double guns can be taken at an angle to make them look good when they're really not. If you buy old shotguns online, be prepared for an occasional disappointment. I just love vintage shotguns. Actually, I like them more than new ones. The craftsmanship and nostalgia of these old guns just can't be replicated today. Downing a pheasant with a 70-year-old shotgun will just always bring a smile to my face. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.